well, we just chalked it up to 2020 because everybody knows 2020 sucks. So who could blame us for not having a plan?
Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories.
So here's my story. It's a holiday story. It's
nice.
Holiday story from my childhood that I had completely forgotten about until just recently. And then I was laughing so hard remembering it that I was like, I'm going to use this for an episode.
Is it like Miracle on 34th Street? It sounds so wholesome already.
It is sort of wholesome, sort of, but hysterical. So,
hey, wait, one question. When you're raised in West Virginia, is getting coal in your stocking a good thing?
That's a great question. I never did get coal in my stocking. So I really cannot personally attest to, but yeah, I mean, it would be good for the economy, I suppose. I knew lots of coal miners. So anyway, back to my story. So here's my story. Probably when I was, 9 or 10, maybe, it was leading up to, I grew up going to a Methodist church, and Methodists are stereotypically famous for the incorporation of food events in our religious tradition. There's a stop, drop, and have a reason to have a big dinner of some sort. Anyway, my dad, for some reason, I'm sure this was still some sort of potluck. It was always potluck. And I'd be really curious to find out what led up to this, like there being one person in charge of this. But somehow my dad was tasked with bringing the salad, like the dinner salad, for 300 people that were supposed to be at this event. Yeah. This is when I was thinking through this story a couple of days ago, I was like, wow, was that like a good idea? But anyway, so my dad, being the meticulous supply chain management guy that he is, whatever, he measured out he got this bowl, like a salad bowl, and he figured out how much that he would need. And basically it was like this kitchen garbage bag full of salad. He made like a black trash bag size. Like he washed the whole inside out to make it like food safe.
That's how all the best salads are served, from what I understand.
Well, but just from a volume standpoint, I mean, there are many things about this story that are funny, but him washing out this garbage bag to make it like clean. And then to transport the salad, it is a black kitchen garbage bag full of salad, and a really lovely salad. And anyway, so we go to the church dinner, we get there, and the church has these little tiny, like, I would almost call them a saucer. It's almost like a saucer with a little bit of a bevel. So it's like slightly deeper than a saucer, but they're these little tiny, maybe like 4-inch across and like 1/2 inch deep, like little tiny place. And that is their little salad thing. So instead of taking like the equivalent of basically like a handful out of this garbage bag, maybe grabbing salad with like 3 fingers, a 3-finger spritz of lettuce goes on each one of these things. So moral of the story is we come home with like half a kitchen garbage bag of salad. Then my dad made us eat for like a week. We were eating salad to try and make it go away. And it just occurred to me that the levels of like communication and planning and like fallout, and then like the fact that I wouldn't eat salad for like a year after that because I was so saladed out. My dad didn't want it to go to waste because he was so salty about the whole thing, and it had taken hours and hours. But even backing up to the part of like, why was one guy in charge of bringing salad for 300 people? Like, what was that meeting like? And it just felt like I'm not even sure exactly where I wanted to take it. I really just wanted to tell the story. So,
well, I'll tell you, there are a couple things that occurred to me, and one of them may be applicable to business. But the first one was that, you were saying that Methodists are famous for food events. And I always thought, in my experience, the Jewish culture was basically summed up in the sentence, they tried to kill us, they failed, let's eat. So it's always been my experience that the Jewish culture is pretty much food oriented. But the other thing, apropos of nothing, that the story reminded me of was an episode of Growing Pains. Yes, I said Growing Pains.
Wow. Wow.
Where, you know what? No, I'm wrong. It's Family Ties. Michael J. Fox's Family Ties.
You're just cruising through my childhood years.
Yes.
This goes nicely with the story because that's right. This story would have happened right around the era of like
See,
Family Ties, Growing Pains. I didn't
there
like
you
Growing
go.
Pains.
There was a situation where they found themselves with an abundance of lobsters for some reason. I don't remember exactly why, but I do remember that the last thing that you heard before it faded to black was Elise calling the family in to get their hot lobster chip cookies. um,
I did not grow up in a family. Our last week's episode was about, or a couple weeks ago, was a rich dad, poor dad theme,
yes,
and so
yes.
I will say I did not grow up in the family with an abundance of lobsters, but
Well,
I did have a crush on Alex B. Keaton, but that's another.
Well,
story
sure,
altogether.
completely different, right? And Mallory wasn't half bad either, but. So what struck me really was that your dad did all of this work on the logistics and the planning, but didn't factor in the delivery mechanism.
Right. Yeah, it never occurred to him that it might not be like a full bowl of salad, like almost as if like that's what you're having for dinner, like salad dinner. And
Yeah, and so I see that when you have corporate planning. I've been talking with a number of clients about their planning for 2021, and a couple conversations have occurred to me, which was that they normally launch their plan and they have a big get together at a kind of the pre-holiday party. So because they have everybody in from the different branches and stuff, and they're having their big thing, and that's when they talk about their new initiatives and they try and get people excited about this, and they want people to be together and brainstorm and all that. And so one client in particular was telling me that she went about all of her planning the same way, figured out all the initiatives, everything that she wanted to do, and she didn't take into account the delivery mechanism because now it's over Zoom.
Right.
And it's completely different. And so she can't roll out everything that she was going to roll out or would have in a normal year because it's not going to be received the same way. There's too much Zoom fatigue. There's not enough spontaneity in your interactions between people. It's all agenda driven. People are, I was going to act it out looking at my phone, but then I realized we don't have a video podcast. But still, people are looking at their phone rather than really paying attention to the message. And then there's no after event where people can kind of congregate and talk about things and all that. So it's the delivery mechanism. And I find that right now, today, the delivery mechanism is what has so many people tied up in knots about any kind of planning.
Well, any kind of planning and also just any kind of anything, really. I mean, I feel like even I'm jumping lanes of conversation here a little bit, but so many of the people I talk to, if they're feeling a little down or out of sorts or disconcerted, like I just hear the sentence over and over and over again. And all the things that I would normally do or reach for to make myself feel better aren't, or, healthy or unhealthy, like aren't available right now. I can't go do that thing or, and it's like those delivery devices, those of any kind of sense of knitting anything together in community or connection or making flow happen are not as readily available. And in some ways, it's been interesting to watch people be more creative and challenge their assumptions about what can and cannot be delivered in certain ways. And then in other ways, it's just a problem. There's no getting around it, that it's going to be a barrier and something is going to be lost because, I hear you say, well, she can't deliver this and she can't roll this out because of all the things you just stated. But then what's the alternative? Don't roll out the plan for 2021. Like if you're waiting until that time when you can get together to do those things, that's not coming anytime soon. So it really is a logjam of decisions and kind of rollouts and whatnot.
It is, but and here's the thing that I know that I'll get that we might get some pushback on. But I also think with all of that being true, I think that it's also easy to use COVID as an excuse, meaning that it's the point of abandonment. Well, this could have been good. It's not, but COVID. This could have been delivered in this way, but well, it's 2020. So, it's almost as if COVID or 2020 is an excuse for it being a lot less than, as opposed to just it being different than. And the conversation with the client was reminiscent of a conversation that you and I had on a previous episode, which was I was asking her about an interview. I was saying, all right, so it's 2022 and you're being interviewed by, Fast Company magazine or whatever about how you got your message out and your planning out in COVID, at the spike at the end of 2020, and you didn't do this. And the question from the interviewer is, so how did you succeed in getting your message out? Yeah. What's the answer? Well, we had
I didn't try.
I didn't try. I mean, right. That
just gave up.
That can't be the answer. That can't be like, well, it was COVID, so we decided not to have a plan.
Right.
Or, well, we just chalked it up to 2020 because everybody knows 2020 sucks. So who could blame us for not having a plan? If that's not going to be your answer, then what you'd have to say is, well, because of the changing circumstances, we had to do this. So what's that answer? And throughout the conversation, she started coming up with, well, we had to, have smaller events. We had to have a variety, while it was virtual, I had, cocktails delivered to them, or I had this, or I had that. And we tried to create community apart.
Yeah. So it's funny. My husband's firm, for the bonuses every year, they do this like increasingly elaborate and hysterical scenario, usually in the conference room. One year they had it all set up like a barnyard country fair thing. And I'm talking like hay on the ground, and everyone was in like overalls and, and it was like a country fair where you have to do these like little events. And then somewhere in there you get your it's very elaborate. One year it was like a whole casino thing. And not only could they not do it inside, but they also can't have their annual party and all that kind of stuff. And, was this year's as great? No, but they also didn't just throw it out the window. They did this thing outside where it was a whole Egyptian theme, and they made these like pyramids, and there was like a whole thing. But then what they did for the food was they worked with a caterer. So like when people came by one, in the whole distance thing, and did their little, some version of this, like play the game, get the thing, whatever. There's always tons of laughs with it. But then there was like a bag of food to take home, like to heat, that was like ready to heat up. Like it wasn't already warm, it was like set so that their whole family could have like a family dinner with, and it was really tasty, by the way, because we got one too. And it's not the same, but it's also not, I don't know, it's a Goldilocks in between, not the same as everybody getting together, but also not doing something. Like what pieces can we put together?
Yeah. And I don't think it has to be that you're in each other's presence. I mean, that would be great, for the party and all that stuff. But I do think that there's something about just your example, what Paul's firm did, because even if, you're not eating dinner on Zoom with other people, but you have this dinner provided by the firm for the family. And so the firm still has this presence. The company still has this presence in their lives and with their family and wishing them well over the holidays. And they're still, I think that psychologically, it's still like, okay, well, we're still a part of something. We've shared in something. The firm wanted to share something with us, and we got to each in our own way celebrate the fact that we're part of this firm. That this is what we do, and these are people who care enough about us to have a shared experience, even if we're apart, which I think is wonderful.
Well, and you just tied something back to the original story that I hadn't really thought of until just this moment, is being part of something, and it's probably even more relevant than I thought because I really did just want to tell the story because I remembered it. I don't care if it goes anywhere.
The new podcast.
Although I laughed way more remembering it than I did when telling the story just now. I'm like, maybe I was just in the moment. But it actually is kind of relevant because the same kind of thing happened. It was an organizational wide thing that was trying to be implemented by people working remotely. My dad was essentially a remote worker with a directive. And, ultimately we're coming back together to be a part of something, but somewhere along the lines, he was making decisions not part of something. He made decisions on his own without checking in or I think it's one of the risks of working remotely and not having some of the, obviously, if they were all in one kitchen preparing this dinner, he never would have gotten to full garbage bag of lettuce because he would have seen the stack of dishes, or he would have just popped over there and looked at them and be like, oh, that's a lot less salad than I think I'm going to need. But things can go more off the rails when you're working totally independently and remotely. And so remembering that you are part of something when remote, I think is also another theme here.
Yeah. And you're right.
Unless you want a garbage bag of salad.
Well, first of all, when you keep saying garbage bag of salad, and I keep thinking about those memes where Americans will do anything to use any unit of measurement to avoid the metric system, right? But anyway.
Well, interesting story on that. And Christy knows the story because we've talked about it a bunch of times. At my elementary school, for whatever reason, there's this tiny brief phase where apparently there was a wave of that we were going to switch to the metric system. I think it was a very brief moment in time. Okay.
Yeah, we had that. Sure.
Okay. Well, it just so happened like that's what I learned. They only taught us the metric system. So I never actually, like in that phase, they're like, we're switching to this. And it's like, they never went back and said like, okay, now that apparently it didn't stick, here's a lesson on like all the other things that we use. And so I always feel a little behind. I'm like, how does that, okay, how many cups in a pint? And what's the quart and the ounces? Like,
well, nobody knows that. That's why there's Google.
Oh, okay.
But no, I think that was Jimmy Carter announced by 1980, the US would be metric.
Right.
And yeah.
And my education system was like, aye, sir, we'll.
Yeah, ours was like, I don't think so. But I saw that there was a statistics that Americans eat like, I'm going to get the number wrong, but 2,000 acres of pizza a year. And the response was, you're measuring pizza in acres now? Why is there so much resistance to the metric system? But anyway, the fact about that you brought up with your dad working alone, it's not that he had no information about the delivery system, the saucers versus the bowls. He in that vacuum, he filled in his own narrative.
Right.
Which we talk about a lot. And so his narrative, he had, maybe it was the bowls that you use at home or that he would.
Which are like cereal bowls. Like that's the volume difference we're talking.
And so that's one of the dangers of remote, because there are so many areas of vacuum that we fill in with our own facts, whether it's, well, what did she mean by that? Or why wasn't I invited to this meeting? Or how come when I sent that email, why wasn't that put on the agenda? Or why aren't we thinking about doing X, Y, and Z now? And people are filling in that vacuum with their own narrative.
Well, especially because, and actually this is a really important point, it's so much easier to check in on a narrative assumption when the person's kind of nearby and you can do it as like a drive-by, be like, oh, hey, meant to ask you, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Now you have to make like a bigger deal about it. It's almost the equivalent of having to say, could I talk to you in the conference room for a moment? That just feels like dun, dun, dun. Like, can we schedule a meeting? And and even like a quick email, it's just it feels like it's more than needed or something just to check in. But I think it's ever more important to check in on those things. And I've caught myself, seeing something that like a friend posts or something and be like, oh, is that aimed at me? Was that like, so, and you just don't know as much, but it almost seems silly. You're like, does that rise to the occasion of an actual, like, was that, Brene Brown has that fantastic phrase in something that she did, like the story I'm making up is as a way to open, like, story I'm making up is here's some things that I see happening. And it just kind of dissolves. It doesn't feel like an accusation. Like you're doing this thing because blah, 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 versus like, here's how I'm stitching together my mosaic of narrative facts into a narrative. Please
Right.
fill
So
me in.
sometimes it's the assumption you're telling yourself a story, and sometimes you're just missing those connections. I mean, it kind of reminds me of the fact, as you know, I work with my sister. She comes in, she's part-time. So pre-COVID, she would come in twice a week and do office management, et cetera. But what I realized is because I was seeing her twice a week and we would text and whatever about what's going on with our mother or whatever, we were up to date on each other's lives. We knew what was happening because I would just see her and go, hey, what happened with this? Or she'd stop in before going back to her office and say, I noticed that this or whatever, and we talk about things. But I haven't seen her other than on Zoom. I haven't seen her since March.
Oh, wow.
And, she's immunocompromised, so she doesn't go out much at all, even to the extent that Nikki and I do, and we're fairly careful. But and so sometimes Nikki will ask me, so what's going on with Ruth? What's going on with your mom? And I realize
I have no idea.
I have no idea. Because I never had to schedule calls with her. And when I see her on Zoom, it's because she's on a firm-wide call and we're just talking about administrative stuff or whatever, or we're emailing about
and even with that
and accountant stuff.
And out of curiosity, even with that awareness, does it feel a little bit weird or awkward, whatever the word would be, to like schedule to call her? Just like the purposefulness of it probably almost feels overkill. And yet without it, you might have a garbage bag of salad.
You might have a garbage bag of salad. And
I really want that to be a catchphphrase. Well, careful. That right there is a garbage bag of salad.
You're opening up a garbage bag of salad. It's going to be a garbage
bag of salad.
Which I think at the very least should be the title of the episode.
Oh, how could it not be?
So that's our story.
But the discussion doesn't have to end here.
No, it does not.
In fact, we don't want it to.
No, we don't.
That is why we actually have our private Facebook group,
which we started to make sure that we could get your comments, your rants, your thoughts,
your stories.
You
can find links to that group as well as show notes and links to subscribe via email and how to find us just about anywhere you can possibly find podcasts at sohere'smystory.com.
And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at SHMS Podcast.
And since we know it takes a village.
Yes, it does.
We'd like to thank our village, our super talented, incredibly patient team.
And occasionally snarky team.
Yeah, but in the best of ways.
In the best of ways.
Snarky.
Yes.
Good mockery.
So a huge shout out to the people who actually help us produce our show. First, our sound engineer, Tom Hansen.
Thanks to Christy Schmier for our brilliant show notes and all the other fantastic writing she does for us.
And to Taylor Mathauer for doing just a little bit of everything.
Including wrangling us.
Which
is no small feat.
No, it's not.
This is Jody Hume.
And I'm Elliot Wagenheim.
And you've been listening to So Here's My Story.